Hi, and welcome to the video on legs and fun things you can do with them, including your hips. So I know I didn't post last week, and that's because my eye was really irritated from wearing contacts more often recently, and that really irritated my eye, so it hurt to look into the light. So filming in front of the window that I film in front of would have been really hard, and then editing in front of a screen would have been impossible. And moving forward, I want to say that I've liked uploading every Tuesday, and I'm going to try to keep doing that because I think the schedule, while it's good and it helps keep me on track, I think that I've also accidentally left out things that I meant to put in because I felt rushed due to the deadline. So it's gonna average out probably to once a week, but it's gonna be after I've done everything that I've wanted to do in the video. So we're gonna be talking about all the things that you can do with your legs that weren't necessarily covered in leg waves. So I'm also gonna talk a little bit about hip and butt stuff, and something that's gonna be really key in this video is the lines. And especially starting now, we're gonna be focusing on your performance in relation to the audience. So instead of just saying like, yes, you need to have your foot pointed, it's gonna be more angle of the audience as opposed to just angle of the body part. So if you're facing the audience, kicking your legs straight up is a lot different than kicking your legs straight out. Another thing that I wanna talk about is how upset I am hearing about unarmed people, especially people of color, getting shot by police. Really angers me. So in some ways I feel disingenuous to that by making a fun poll video when there's so much stuff going on. And I know I have like 10 followers, but I'm still gonna post below some links to donate to if you're in a position to. And I might continue to do that in future videos, just posting below to a charity or a cause that is relevant for that given week. So I know that's kind of a bummer, but the whole situation's a bummer. That's just where we are in the world right now. I wanted to do that, but I also love making these videos, and if it makes me feel better, it can possibly make somebody else feel better in the current terrible climate. So we're gonna have a fun video to distract ourselves from what's going on in the world, and hopefully you learn something and you have fun, like I hope all my videos do. So let's get into some lower body stuff, okay? So as always, we're gonna start on the ground. So I just utilize that leg move so we know what we're gonna be doing with our legs. So with our hands, we're going to twist it down on the bottom, and then we're gonna do that same palm back of the hand twist that I did in an earlier video. I'm not sure which one right now. So palm, back of the hand, and then twist again, and then we're gonna bring those legs around. So shown in action, hands are in the right place, and then you twist, making your legs a little diamond shape, land on both knees again, and you can just continue doing this move in a circle. So that little diamond shape with your legs that you can do is really helpful. I like doing it while I'm playing around on the ground. So for here, bottom leg towards the pole, move those hips forward, place the hand down, and then legs together, and then you hit to that same diamond pose and then spin around. So next up, when we're kind of lying on the ground, we can make interesting shapes with our legs, having one bent or both straight, and then utilizing our hips to make interesting movement in our legs and hitting it down, and we can clack our heels together and it sounds good. So a cool way to get off the floor is moving one leg up, then shifting your other knee towards your chest. It's very important that you move that knee in and you don't just pull yourself towards that knee. It's an aesthetic issue. So in action, this is what this can look like in an actual routine. So the legs are important in every part of a routine. Coming up off the pole is super important. So generally when I stop here after a spin, I like to kick it out like a little pop and then come up. So of course we want to make sure that our ankles are okay, and keeping those angles in mind, pushing down, and then we can do that cool diamond shape again. And also when you're doing cool things with your legs, you always want to make sure that you're aware of what your hips are doing so they can turn from side to side, and then those bring your legs with them. So externally rotating one, internally rotating the other as a utilitarian move in between other moves, most likely. So when posing or moving, your hips and leg placement are super important. So your hips are important for everything that your legs do, and your legs should either be straight or bent. That's true going down and up the pole. So going down, one leg's bent, one straight, or both bent. And it's very important that you keep that in mind as you're going, as well as how far apart those thighs are to create a wider angle. Wide like a straddle. So you can keep one bent, one straight, or the other bent as well. You want to keep this in mind when you're just playing around the pole, moving, threading through, that one stays straight and one stays bent. And that is especially true during dynamic moves. As well, even with straight legs, you can have a lot of fun. You can pound your legs on the ground. I'm not too flexible in this direction, so that's the amount of bounce that I got. You can do those leg waves, keeping in mind of what your audience is seeing. So I also like doing this move in exotic pieces where you kind of push those legs forward. And that looks best with a bent leg. It's awkward and hard to do it with straight legs. So instead of slamming it down like that, having more of a push forward with the legs. And this and other leg moves are super important to consider audience perspective. So going towards the side, especially in a straight legged version, would be far more awkward than doing it towards the front. So I'm going to slow this portion down because TikTok legs can be kind of hard to grasp while they're fast for the first time. So you're going to externally rotate that one leg down and then internally rotate it to come up, keeping those knees together. You can also do this as you externally rotate to bring it out. So things to keep in mind with those TikTok legs is that you're going to keep your knees together and then bring your foot around to the other side. You're going to try to aim for 90 degrees. It's not going to happen. And then you externally rotate. So you can see that that knee comes away after. So once again, it's our good friend external and internal rotation. So you internally rotate that leg when you're bringing that foot out, and then you externally rotate when you're bringing it towards the center. Like that, nice and slowly. So it's external and then it moves to internal with your knees together. This is also a move to keep in mind with your direction towards the audience because to the side, it kind of looks like nothing. So I want to emphasize this internal and external rotation. So as your knees point together and you're internally rotated, the legs are out. And when you change that to external rotation, your foot comes in. So kneeling like this, it's a little awkward to see, but I hope you get the gist. So other than the rotation, things to keep in mind are tucking that hip and tailbone under. So you're most likely going to see this during the external rotation portion of this move. So as you externally rotate, you pull that down. This looks a little dirty. I promise it's not. As you pull under, you tuck up through your core. So just to recap what this can look like side to side instead of with your legs straight up. You can see it's all hip and knee. So you can do these from a variety of positions. You can even do them in a shoulder mount. Obviously, I'm not strong enough to do that, but basically the main thing is keeping those legs together if they're going to stay straight and tilting your hips with them as you internally and externally rotate through that circle. So something really cool you can do with this is heel clacks. So hips up, hands supporting. You can make really cool sounds. I'm leaving in some filler footage to emphasize that you want to use both legs at all times. I've seen way too many choreographies where only one of the legs was doing a TikTok clack and then only one of the legs got brought up at a time and it looks super awkward. So always make sure you do both. Moving on to that external internal rotation butt shake that we've talked about in the past. So this is an example of what it looks like. You can do it lying on your back like I just did. You can do it standing up. You can do it up the pole. And I just wanted to emphasize that you can do it the same way we did those clacks. So you can combine them as well, making that butt a shelf and then doing a little clack. You can hook the leg and then bring that other leg, swing it around. And then you can end it with a nice pose. This pose is really fun and it's relatively easy to fake a flexibility here. I've seen someone lick their knee. It's super fun. You can play around with it and take all the time you want to breathe after doing a floor routine. And that brings me to my next point of posing with your legs. I'll only talk briefly on this because as long as your face is working the audience, you can basically do whatever you want with your legs. So again, this is that weird octopus leg wave. And that doesn't take too much effort and can allow you to breathe. And when you're posing, you can always just take a minute to caress your leg. So now we're going to focus a little more on hips. So the main mechanism for making your hips do cool things is the motion you see here. So there's that curve in the spine, and you may want to really curve it, but you want to always make sure that this section is tucked in, so around your waist to that pubic bone, and tuck yourself in. That'll protect your core whenever you're doing this. So keeping your core in mind, then you can start to learn the twerking motion. At first there's going to be a lot of back movement when you're trying to learn how to do this, but eventually you'll learn how to tuck your hips under and do the full motion like this. This is it, slow motion, without using too much of the rest of your back. Plus, twerking is an excellent way to put those knee pads to work, especially if you're inexperienced or want more drama in those movements. You can also flex individual cheeks and twerk from this position. In terms of angles, you want to make sure that your knees are far enough apart that you actually get movement in your butt, or else it'll look like that. So another thing to keep in mind, if your knees are too close together, that's what it'll look like from the side. So you want to make sure that things are moving better with your knees further apart. So a bit more on posing, again, from any angle of your leg that you want. If you just touch up your leg, it'll look good, and make sure that you're looking at your audience and that the angle that they are looking at is interesting as well. It can be straight or bent as always. And then here, a fun way to play with your hips is to move the rest of your ribs around, do little pops, and then move down like we did earlier with your legs. And focusing back on angles for a second, you want to make sure that your upper body is involved as well, or else you can look like you're odd and crouching. So you always want to make sure that your shoulders are doing things that they're supposed to. Here again, just showing that flexing from the side can look good, and that you can have some movement upright, just making sure that those knees are far enough apart that you actually get movement in those areas. So again, with ways to come up, if you want to push just above those knees, not on the knees, you don't want to stress them out, but just above them to come up, that can also look really good. And up at the top here, just remembering to pose and move your legs just a little bit. They don't need huge amounts of movement, as you're just killing time and looking good. So I just want to show some more contemporary moves you can do with your legs. One that I see a lot is pushing those legs away, either one at a time or together. This one can work for contemporary or exotic, so just touching your legs is more exotic, but making sure that those legs are straight as you are bent over. And another thing to keep in mind if you're looking into contemporary styles is interesting angles. So instead of thinking what is sexy, think about what is going to create an interesting silhouette. And that's in poses and moves. So often in a low flow class, you're going to have interesting spins with legs bent straight to create interesting lines. If that's something that interests you, please look into a low flow class in your area. So another thing to keep in mind as we move up the pole with your legs is where your audience is. See, I'm going to do a mock iguana through a handstand position, and moves like this are going to look a lot better to the side than if
your back is to the audience or facing away from the audience.
So I wanted to pop back on here and talk about lines for a minute before I give you some examples. First of all, the examples I'm going to use are mostly ballet. So I've mentioned lines before, so I thought I would clarify what I was talking about when I say that. Instead of thinking of a move, like your arm goes here, your leg goes here, point your toes. Thinking of a move as one continuous line is going to really help the aesthetic of your moves. Yes, you can be doing a move and it can be technically fine, but little things can throw off your line and can leave it looking either unprofessional or sloppy, or in most cases, it'll just seem weird to look at. The way you create nice lines is through the use of angles. That's using the more movable body parts like your arms, legs, and your neck to create something. Creating nice lines in your moves elevates your whole performance. So it's like when I mentioned in the sexy video how important your face is, it's similar to that. So instead of having your tongue out and looking awkward, or in the foot pointing video when I talked about sickling, cutting off your line, these are things to keep in mind, especially when you're looking at competitive pieces. One of my favorite moves of all time is Allegra. I'm very conscious of the angle that my hips are at, as well as the angle of my knee. To me, the prettiest Allegras are the ones that are relatively even. If you know your flexibility in grabbing that leg isn't strong, in terms of your line, it could be beneficial to keep that leg either bent on the pole or bent over your arm instead, because that creates a cool zigzag as opposed to looking like I call it a sewing needle. It's a weird bent loop and a straight leg. So to use some dance terms I grew up hearing, to clean up your line, it's to make that a little more even, to make the line more interesting. I know people say the next level of Allegra is having a leg straight off the pole. You can have that leg bent over your arm instead and create a symmetrical line as opposed to one that's lopsided. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that quickly.
So I'm going to do the 3 variations that I talked about. First up is the one with the leg still on the pole. So this one works if you're nervous or if you want to work through the flexibility in that bottom leg as well. Off the hand, the line looks pretty similar, and then when you straighten the leg, it looks more like that, which in my humble opinion looks worse than the bent leg variations, even though it's technically harder. So I'm going to briefly touch on kicking. So here's what a kick back looks like from the side. From the back, that's what that looks like. And then facing forward, what a kickback looks like. Now, moving on to the front variation, a kick forward, a kick from the side, and then a front kick facing back. And again, we're going to show that from the side angle, a kick sideways to the front, and then a kick sideways to the side, and a kick sideways from the back. You can see the different variations in all of those, and you can see that some looked better than others. So keep that in mind when you're putting together pieces. You always want to make sure that your audience sees your best angle. So that best angle works for exotic pieces as well. You want to make sure that you're looking at the audience when you are doing things.
So I'm gonna stop it there because I can talk about lines for hours. So I hope you liked learning more about legs. I want to emphasize that next week's video is gonna be about lines in general. So that includes your head, neck, arms, and like a little bit of the rest of your body. And I'm going to talk more about leg lines as well. Get into it. So once again, I love and appreciate everybody that has subscribed already. And if you haven't, please subscribe. I know I said that videos are going to be a little more unregulated now in terms of time. So I appreciate you guys being patient with me in uploading videos. As I said, last week I just skipped it entirely because my eye was so irritated I wouldn't be able to edit. So I hope you got some value out of this video. I hope you learned some cool leg and hip things, and I hope that you can apply them into your next routine, your next choreography or your next class. And I also want to reiterate some self-care for your legs. So again, knee pads for repetitive movements, as well as resting them in between sessions, and appropriate pillow placement when you're sleeping, and applying hot and cold compresses as needed. Especially if you hear anything when you're training or you feel something pull a little bit, you definitely want to make sure that you rest and apply appropriate heat or cold to your legs. They are super important. You need them for everything. If you know anyone that has or has had a hamstring injury, you know that doesn't go away. And also when you're stretching your legs, you definitely want to hold back when you start to feel it hurt. For me, whenever I'm in a straddle split, I can get a very sharp pain right at my knee on the inner side, because the tendon thinks it's going to be easier to detach from the knee than to stretch out that muscle. So definitely be careful. And if you're doing a lot of leg things and you notice they're getting more sore or your back's getting sore, please go seek out a massage or physiotherapist. Try to look for those professionals that are recommended to you from aerialists or circus performers or pole dancers, because they're going to recommend people who work with them as opposed to just telling them to stop moving, which we all know you're not going to do. So I have nothing else for you, and I will see you next time with a video on lines. My eyes look amazing.